something. Okay, so you'll know the meeting's been being recorded. There's also an option if you'd like closed captions to select those, if that helps you to see or hear. And again, I'll introduce myself. I'm Nancy Pyock. I am the independent facilitator, and I'm here to help you have a good information session here today. So Daisy, you want to repeat the interpretation option?
Sure. Of course. Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por estar aquí. Esta noche tenemos interpretación disponible en español. Si gustan escuchar la presentación en español, en el fondo de su pantalla hay un icono que dice Interpretation, parece un globito así. Hagan clic ahí y hagan clic en español y así podrán escuchar esta presentación en español. También en un rato vamos a abrir el chat y si tienen preguntas, pueden enviar sus preguntas en español en el chat también. Muchas gracias.
Great. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Yes,
So,
okay.
Can't hear you.
They're supposed to be something, but I don't think.
That's because we're not on it yet.
you know what, folks, if you can mute yourself. There you go. Thank you. Just as we do the presentation, we're going to have an opportunity for you to be able to ask questions directly of folks here today. So I want to welcome you. Thank you for taking time this afternoon to come and hear about the proposed Safe Stay community that is being proposed, the new site, and being willing to share your input and ask questions. So as part of the process for today, there's been outreach that has been conducted to invite neighbors that are in the surrounding community for this Safe Stay site. And that includes just the community members as well as the school district, Discovery Middle School, and neighborhood groups. So we thank you all for helping to get the word out about this and to also be participating. Just shows just how much you care about your community. So first, what I want to do is I'm going to go through a little bit of the agenda with you all to let you know how it's going to work. I'm going to introduce the people that will be speaking. We're going to be doing a brief information session to give you updates and information about this site, but we've reserved the bulk of the time for your questions. And in order to make sure that that there's not a lot of distraction while we have that presentation, we won't be using the chat, but as soon as we're at a place where questions can be taken, we will open up that chat and you can ask your questions. You can raise hands or put a question in the chat and we'll make sure that you get answered in that way too. So first, I just want to introduce the members of our city team and other partners that we're working with here today. And so I guess what I'll do is I'll just mention your name and if you can just say hello so your box will light up. Sound good? So first we have Deputy City Manager Lon Plucon is here. There you go. And you can, yeah, if you unmute yourself and say hello.
Hello.
There you go. We have our Homeless Response Manager, Jamie Spinelli.
Hi.
And CMO Admin Assistant, Carrie Peck.
Hi there.
We have Vancouver Police Officer and our Heart member, Tyler Chavers.
Hi.
And we also have several other members of our police department here, including Officer Gelsinger. Not seeing him here. He was here earlier. Officer Sean Metabia.
Hello, everybody.
And Officer Juma.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, and it looks like we also have Officer Jeremy Freed. Is that right?
Yeah, it's hard to get that wrong.
Well, I saw the uniform. And I think a lot of the law enforcement attending. Oh, and last but not least, we have Chief Jeff Morey here as well.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, so thank you all for being here. And I know that certain of these officers are your neighborhood police officers as well. So helpful to have that very close to the community touch here with today's presentation. We also have a community engagement manager, William Cooley,
Good afternoon, everyone.
and he's our resource for anything technical today with the Zoom, as well as community liaison, Anna Quintrell.
Welcome, everyone.
And we also have Daisy Quinones, who is with the neighborhoods office, right? Okay. And then, did I miss anybody from the city? Lots of people we know, and it takes a village to run one of these information sessions for you all. Anybody else? We just want to make sure that you have all the information that you need.
I'm here too. I'm the community engagement coordinator for the city, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine Stanton. Okay. So then we also just want to introduce partners here today who are also going to be sharing some information. And from Do Good Multnomah, we have the contractor for the Safe Stay site, Chief Executive Officer Daniel Hovanes.
Good afternoon, y'all.
Yeah, great. And then from Washington Department of Transportation, we've got the Southwest Washington Administrator, Carly Francis.
Good afternoon.
And the Assistant Regional Administrator for Maintenance Operations, Bill Morrison.
Good afternoon.
And then we also have Southwest Region Communications Manager, Tamara Greenwell. Maybe we don't. Okay. Some people join and then they drop off for various reasons. Anybody else that I missed, and folks on any of the teams, anybody else that you're seeing, just want to let the community know who else is in the room that they might want to be aware of. I know it looks like some media is also part of this meeting, so thank you for coming and covering the topics that are of interest to this community. All right. And we'll have a chance for you, for the rest of the community, to participate a little bit so we know where you're from in just a little bit. But right now, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Lon to give some welcoming remarks.
Thanks, Nancy. First, I wanted to echo your statement from earlier about thanking everybody for taking some valuable time out of your day to join our electronic meeting for our first outreach session regarding the Safe Stay 4 homelessness response site. What Nancy didn't say is that as one of my departments, I have the policy and program division of the city, which includes the city's homelessness response team. So this is one of the areas that I have responsibility for. There's a couple of folks on the call with Jamie Spinelli and Tyler Shavers that are two of the key members of the city's HEART team that really work with this on a daily basis across the entire community, but also have done a lot of the work to really do the program design for the Safe Stay model of a response. As I said, this would be the fourth site that the city has proposed. We have selected a site for Site 3, but it hasn't gotten in operation yet, as we're waiting to get a bid out to get costs for doing the construction on it. So in all likelihood, 3 and 4, if 4 does go through, would be opened up around the same time, likely the middle of the fall. They're built around the idea of establishing a safe area that's supervised 24/7 with services on site to really provide a place of stability and respite for people that are currently unhoused across the community. When we set them up, we do a lot of outreach to the folks in the immediate neighborhood that are already unhoused and offer them an opportunity to come in and really start on a path to re-engaging with broader society and ultimately ending up in permanent housing. We've had great success with the ones that we've already have. I hope that people would take us up on invitations to tour either of the two active sites and really see what they're all about. We're excited about this one because this is the first one that would be a partnership between us and Do Good in Multnomah, who has a few tweaks to their operating model and the services on site that I think we're really intrigued about and see a lot of possibilities accountability to that would help the residents to really re-engage and move out of homelessness back into more permanent, more stable housing. But also it's our first one that is a partnership with another governmental agency. The first two were on city-owned property. The third one is proposed on a privately owned site that we would be leasing. But this one is a site that's owned by the Department of Transportation. And both agencies have been dealing with the impacts of homelessness for quite a while and really would like to have the opportunity to collaborate on this and do work that actually moves the community, meaningfully moves the needle towards addressing homelessness across the city of Vancouver. So with that, I'd say, what we want to hear this afternoon is people's concerns about it. Any questions that you might have, we'll certainly try to answer them, as many as we can during the course of this presentation, but always happy to follow up afterward with broader questions or things that we don't have the right folks on here to necessarily be able to answer today. But when we started doing this, we committed to doing community engagement because each site is unique. There may be things about the neighborhood that we don't know that we want to take into consideration, either as we set up the site or that could ultimately mean that we would look at a different location. The process that we have set up, there are a couple of things about it that, just to kind of let everybody know at the beginning, the council's been very clear that across the community, there's no sacred cows. There's no area that's exempt from being looked at as a location for one of these. Ultimately, our plan would be to have 5 of these across Vancouver in all areas of the city, but really it concentrated in areas where there's already people who are homeless to serve the populations where they are, because they're attracted to those locations for reasons, whether it's access to transit, whether it's services that are already available, rather than try to relocate them into a completely remote location. It works far better to just kind of meet them where they are. Beyond that, we want to hear questions. I'd hope that maybe some of you have some hopes for what we're going to be able to accomplish with this. And we're going to be committed to staying engaged. Next week, we have an in-person session that we will be doing for Safe Stay 4, and ultimately looking towards a decision towards the end of June for getting ready to move forward with a site. So with that, I will turn things back over to Nancy.
Great. Thank you so much, Lon. And so Carly Francis would like to have you just say a few words to talk about Washington Department of Transportation's involvement.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so again, I'm the Southwest Region Administrator that covers 7 counties in Southwest Washington, including Clark County. We have encampments across the state, and that is an issue that we are ill-equipped to deal with. And I know folks often see that in the world, and folks have differing opinions on how we manage those challenges. A lot of that work we do in partnership with local agencies, because we don't hire social workers. We don't hire, we don't have housing to offer. And so it's critical for us to have partnerships with folks to navigate those challenges, because frankly, it's just not safe for people to be sheltering in some places where they seek shelter. We do, by way of limited time and staff and resources and not wanting to push people around, we do take a sort of a tier-stepped approach to how we navigate these issues, and look sometimes to leave people in place because it just pushes them to another place in the community. And when there are safety issues, we look to balance those: safety of folks sheltering there, safety of folks traveling, as well as safety of our workers in choosing to take action and move folks. But those steps really, it requires critical outreach, which we partner with the city on to do, to let folks know if those changes are coming, to look for opportunities to store belongings if necessary, to make sure there's safety and security for our site and for our crews in navigating those issues. And then our last step, which is really the step we are most responsible for, is working on restoration and cleanup of property. Because this is a statewide issue, I talk with my counterparts all the time on partnerships that they have with local entities. And I would just flag for folks that the work that the City of Vancouver is doing in this area, to my understanding, is very unique within the state. And the leadership they're showing in this space is valuable. And it's making the opportunity to partner, really an obvious choice for us. We have a clear stake in this issue because folks are sheltering on our right of way. And this provides an opportunity to more sort of participate more in a step forward for folks as opposed to just pushing folks around. So we're very excited about the partnership and the opportunity here. I'm very interested to hear people's questions and feedback during this session. And if there are questions for us, happy to answer them. But really this partnership is unique. And I really, I think it's my understanding really this would be a unique partnership across the state, would be the first situation like it, in the state of Washington. So we're really excited about that partnership and appreciate the City of Vancouver's leadership and the community's recognition of kind of a holistic approach to supporting folks out of, I'm sure, what they have found to be a situation they never expected themselves to be in. So we're excited about the partnership and happy to be here and happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Nancy.
Great. Thank you, Carly, for just illuminating a lot of the background. People may not be aware of how involved your agency is and how impacted and the concerns and how you really want to try to do something in a positive way regarding houselessness. So we'll be hearing more from Carly if you have questions for her or other people from Washington DOT. But what we wanted to really know is kind of who's in the room. And so we have a brief 2-question poll that we're going to pose here. And so if you can take a moment just to select the answer on the poll that fits you the best. There's 2 questions. When you think about safe state community proposed for the Main Street location, which best describes you? And we'll be tallying those numbers. William will let us know when we've got, looks like we've got a critical mass of responses.
Oh, we'll give folks about another 10 seconds.
Okay. Okay, so let's look at those results, folks. A great number of you, the majority, live nearby, or some of you go to school nearby. And then we've got a lot of business owners too, and interest from just all different parts of the city. So that's really great to know who's here and that. Again, just appreciate that you're able to make the time to do this today. So we have one more question. And that question is, what's your personal experience with homelessness? And it's helpful for us to know how people are impacted these days. How's it looking, Bill or William?
Give folks about another 10 seconds and we'll go ahead and share the poll.
Okay, so just taking a look at these results, and see that it looks like just about everybody has been impacted in some way, and some people with actually having that experience of homelessness or someone close to them. And it sounds like there's also just an enormous amount of support for community members. And I think it's just important to know who's in the room with this, that it is a very deeply personal topic and experience. It's complex. People feel these impacts in many different ways. And so, knowing that there's things that you appreciate about your community that you have in common, And this is one of them, really, just this concern about what's happening and the impacts. We want to just make sure that this conversation today is rooted in respect for all the different circumstances and perspectives that people might have. You know, whether you're someone who's living close by to the site, your experience with houselessness. And so if we can just have that commitment to have this conversation in respect. We put some conversation guidelines here that are just basically ways to help us have a very respectful, healthy dialogue, speaking from your own experience, listening to understand each other, that respect that I've talked about, that we may have differences. Let's be curious. Let's try to understand those differences. Make sure we leave time for everybody to participate. And that's part of my role, is to help you with that. So if I do interrupt or ask, ask to help clarify a question, I just want you to take it in that spirit, that I want to make sure everybody has time. And your questions are most valuable. That's why we're here. We want to answer some of those questions up front, the most commonly asked ones, but we know how important it is to be able to give voice to your concerns, your needs, and your input, your things that can make this better, improve the situation. So with that, we will, again, at the end of the presentation, invite you to share more. I'm going to turn this over to Jamie for just more information about this. And I also wanted to say, we'll be having this question and answer session. And then if folks who really want to ask a more personal question, don't want to be on camera, that type of thing, we'll be ending the formal meeting, stopping the recording, and you'll still be able to ask questions for another half an hour after the session is over. So lots of opportunities and ways to give input in ways that are most comfortable for you. So now, Jamie, go forward with what you'd like to tell folks about.
Thank you, Nancy. Again, my name is Jamie Spinelli. I'm the homeless response manager for the City of Vancouver. So establishment of these sites, as well as overseeing the city's homeless assistance and resource team, which is our own outreach team, and just addressing the impacts of unsheltered homelessness within the city kind of falls under my purview. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on homelessness to start with, and kind of explain how we got here. Homelessness is for sure not just a Vancouver issue. I think, as everyone knows, we often get compared to other cities. Maybe we're not as bad as, but these things do grow. And as you can see over time, these numbers came from the point in time count that was done last year, conducted last February. And as you can see, the numbers for both sheltered and unsheltered are on the rise. That is pretty consistent over the last decade. I anticipate that will continue to increase. We should have the numbers out. Council for the Homeless is probably going to be reporting on those sometime in the next month to see how many were counted this past January. We have increased shelter capacity with our safe stay communities that are currently open, as well as the county has increased some shelter capacity over the last year and a half. However, despite those increases, the number of people living unsheltered have still grown. And the reasons for that are many and varied. They're as varied as the number of people experiencing homelessness, from just a lack of affordable housing to family crises to behavioral health challenges, or sometimes a combination of any of those things. So this is the reason that we are needing to address homelessness, particularly the city, in a more aggressive way. Next slide, please. So as I said, this is not just a Vancouver thing. This is an everywhere thing, and it really does take literally everyone in the community to do this. This is just kind of a small sampling of the organizations in Vancouver and Clark County that are addressing homelessness in one capacity or another. And these are nonprofits, these are churches, this is the county, this is the school district and various schools, the police department, you name it, kind of, it's all hands on deck. And Do Good's not up here on this slide, but you'll be introduced to them a little bit later. Next slide, please. I really wanted to include this slide because in these sessions and in conversations with community members, I frequently hear folks have the belief that we are congregating services in one particular area of town. And I wanted to show this just to show that we actually have services all over town of a variety of types, right? Food and clothing, like food and clothing banks, supportive housing complexes, shelter of different types, and a variety of other services. They really are over town, all over town. And I think that's important to note because decades ago, it was true that the majority of services was on the west side, kind of in the downtown area. It used to also be true that that's where the bulk of our homeless population was. But just like these services, our homeless population has scattered, it's spread all over the city, largely along those kind of transportation corridors. Next slide, please. So in general, our homeless response plan really focuses on those kind of emergent and immediate health and safety issues. So the homeless assistance and resource team, we kind of spend our days providing outreach and assistance to people who are living in encampments, as well as assessing encampments for cleanup and sanitation needs, and then coordinating and implementing those cleanups. We have some assistance from Share's Talk and Trash program, which is kind of a litter cleanup program that's not specific to homeless litter, but is specific in that it employs individuals who are experiencing homelessness to go out and pick up trash. We have a safe parking site, which is out at 138th and 18th, and that's for individuals who are living in their vehicles or trailers or RVs. And we're looking for another location for one of those as well. Next slide, please. And then our safe stay communities. So safe stay communities are really just kind of small, quickly implemented communities that help us get people off the streets, provide just safer, more humane living conditions as people work to transition out of homelessness. Each one of them has 20 shelters and office space, so they can shelter up to 40 residents. I think of note is the very first safe stay community that we opened in December 2021 was the very first shelter in Clark County that that sheltered couples that don't have children. So prior to that, people either did not access shelter or they had to separate, which most people won't do. So that's why there's 2 beds in these, in case we do have some couples. So each of these sites is operated by a nonprofit 24/7. So there's always staff on site. There is fencing that provides a little bit of privacy. They have sanitation and hygiene services on site. And then we bring community services to the site to provide the supports that people need to transition out. And that looks like mental health, behavioral health, medical assistance comes on site, veterinarians, etc. And the funding for these is from the city's Affordable Housing Fund. Next slide. So the location that we are proposing is the site at 4611 Main, which is just north of the Kiggins Bowl. The whole property is a little over 18,000 square feet, but we are only proposing to take kind of a small corner of it on the east end of the site. So it really would be set pretty back from the street. And as mentioned, it's owned by WashDOT. So as you can see, this is north of the north side of it is where Main Street crosses I-5. And I think unique about this site is that it's kind of set in some trees, which I guess maybe people don't think of when thinking about siting homeless services, but most of our other 2 sites don't have like any trees around. So having some shade is actually pretty nice. So this location was selected because it meets the site selection criteria, first and foremost. We require that all of our sites be close to public transit, within a half mile at least. It requires that they be equitably spaced around the city, which this does meet. We've got one in a little more East Vancouver, one central. We've got another one that's slated for downtown, as Lon mentioned earlier. And then this one, of course, is north of the west side. As much as possible, we attempt to avoid placing them in areas of highest economic vulnerability. And most important is that we are meeting a local need. So there are people experiencing homelessness already in that general area, because we don't want to move people, as Lon mentioned, from where they are clear across town, because people choose where they are just as the rest of us do, for a variety of reasons. So once a safe stay opens up, we implement a 1,000-foot no camping buffer around every one of these. And that's something that the NPOs and the HART team and other officers can and do enforce. That's pretty stringently enforced. And that blue area around there shows what that buffer looks like. I do know that it covers like the football field. That's not like a great image, but I do know that it covers on the south end of the football fields. And we would begin noticing people who are camping within that area as soon as construction on the site starts. This is a question that I think has probably been most different from other sites, interestingly enough, is that this one is near school, and people want to know why that is the case. And I think it's important that people know that all of our sites are pretty near schools, daycares, or other like childcare like facilities. The first one is right near the YMCA. The Safe Park is just kitty corner from Evergreen High School and Cascade Middle School. Second one is near Vancouver Flex Academy. So we're very near other schools, and there have not been any negative issues between our sites and the schools. And in fact, the schools and the kids who go to these schools have actually been great supporters and great partners in these projects. We just at Christmas time had a group of 4th, 5th, and 6th graders come out and do a Christmas party that turned into like a giant recess at our first site. We've had preschoolers and kindergartners who've come out and volunteered at site 2. And then we've got several schools and youth groups who bring out sack lunches. And I think the YMCA, a youth group at the YMCA helped build a meditation garden at the first site, which is, I just saw today, is blooming nicely. Next slide, please. So I'm going to pass this over to Daniel from Do Good. They are the provider that we have contracted with for this site. I want to quickly just mention that one of the other questions I've frequently gotten about this so far is why did we not select a provider that is local? And Daniel will speak to his connection and their connection to Vancouver, but I wanted to just also mention that no local providers actually submitted a proposal for this site, so that just wasn't an option for us. But I'll let Daniel talk about what they do.
Thanks, Jamie. That's great. Yeah, hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Hovanes. I am the CEO of Do Good Multnomah. For those who don't know Do Good, we are a nonprofit that primarily works in Multnomah and Clackamas County. We were established in 2015 with the idea that no veteran should ever slip through the cracks. And so when we started Do Good, before we started Do Good, when working at other nonprofits, there's a thing that we always noticed, that it was easier for veterans to be screened out than to be screened in. And so when we created Do Good, it was with the understanding that it doesn't matter if you served 20 years or 1 day in the military, you were considered a veteran. And whether you're active duty or National Guard, that you deserve to have a home. Thus, Do Good started on Veterans Day of 2015 in a modest room in a basement of a church that was just big enough to fit 13 folks in. And we have progressed quite a bit in the last 8-9 years. And to kind of speak about a little bit working with nearby schools and all that, one of our first shelters in a church was at Rose City Park Methodist Church here in Portland. And one of the first floors was a preschool. And, you know, we were a shelter there for a couple of years. And this preschool and their parents actually were probably Do Good's biggest champions. Once a month, the parents would serve meals to the guys. And I mean, it was a wonderful relationship, and I anticipate that being very similar to the middle school there that we'll be next to. But really, you know, Do Good after COVID and at the start of COVID really took off. You know, the need was rampant in Portland here, and mission grew to not only serve veterans, but to then serve non-veterans. And so right now, you know, Do Good is currently serving about 550 folks on any given night, having about 200 and some staff members and about 14 programs across Multnomah and Clackamas County. And really, you know, Vancouver, and kind of talk about our connection there, is really my connection to Vancouver. I have lived in Vancouver the last 32 years. Kiggins Bowl, I have played many soccer games at Kiggins Bowl. I went to Evergreen High School and would play against Skyview there all the time. And I went to Mill Plain Elementary and Harmony Elementary, and this is a city that I love dearly. And so to have the chance to bring Do Good's expertise and knowledge and experience to the city of Vancouver is an honor and a huge responsibility that doesn't fall on me lightly. And so, you know, I'm very eager to be part of the solution here in this city and see what Do Good can offer. Part of it, I'm sure there's a lot of questions around who can stay in this village. And so I want to be clear that there will be background checks for everyone who comes in. And so we'll be screening out folks who are sex offenders and folks who have been convicted of violent crimes. And also there'll be a referral process. We'll be working closely with Jamie's team and other folks of the city of Vancouver. You, as well as neighbors, will be able to refer folks. We'll have a phone number on our website, and I'm sure there'll be an FAQ sheet on the city's website that can kind of talk about the village, and on there there'll be a referral number that you can refer your neighbors if you would like. We'll also have a partnership with the VA, as you know, Do Good does serve veterans. Some of these pods will be for veteran folks. But yeah, you know, and some of the skills that we'll bring is case management and housing navigation, you know, and so a big part of the work that we want to do is be able to transition folks into permanent housing, and not just to put folks into an apartment just to say, hey, good job, Do Good, we did it, but to have a spot for them where they will be successful, and it's a long-term, it's a good fit for them. You know, we're not interested in adding additional barriers to individuals. So I'm sure there are a ton of questions. I will, whenever the chat is disabled, or enabled, I will put my email in here, and so folks can reach out, and I would love to either have a phone call or a Zoom meeting or grab coffee with you all if you have additional questions. And I'd love to chat about Do Good and our involvement, and talk about just how excited I am to be working here in the city of Vancouver. So I don't know if I passed it back to Jamie or Nancy.
Thanks, Daniel. So kind of in near closing here, I wanted to make sure that it's very known that we are looking for how to make this the best fit and as safe as we can for the entire community, as well as the potential residents that will move into these. So the neighborhood police officer for your area is always a resource. Lee Gelsinger, I'm not sure if he's here yet, but he might be later. As is, oh, there he is. I see him now. As is the Heart team, and Officer Chavers and my whole team. And so we wanted you to make sure that you had the contact information for those folks. And then I think, is that it? That is it. I think then I'm going to pass it to Nancy, and we're going to do questions.
Great. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Jamie and Daniel, for giving us that overview. And now is your time, all the folks that are here, we're going to turn on the chat, and it depends on your comfort level. We'd love to hear and see you. However, we know not everybody wants to be recorded and or speak in a public meeting. So we'll be monitoring. You can raise your hand. There's a reactions button where you can raise your hand to let us know that you want to speak, and it'll move you to the top of it'll just let me know. I'll be able to see you really quickly. And then we'll also be monitoring the questions. So I do see Dina Havdi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If you'd like to go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dina Havdi. I'm a resident in the Lincoln neighborhood. I appreciate being able to weigh in on this idea. I hope it makes a difference and that city leaders do not proceed with siting a homeless encampment at the location proposed. I know it's nice to be able to say we're doing something, but I don't think this is the right thing to do and that there are better solutions. I've experienced homelessness myself, volunteered with homeless people, and worked with a homeless shelter in town. This property next to Kickens Bowl near a middle school is not a good location for Vancouver's efforts to make life more livable for one group of people at the expense of other groups in the community, including our youth. Like I said, I live here in the Lincoln neighborhood. I'm near this site often. This location is a kid-centric area. Homeless people are not congregating on or near the property now, as far as I have seen, which is a point that has been raised in this meeting, that it is smart to meet people where they are. I have seen homeless people congregating in other areas of the city. Sorry, I'm losing my sheet here. My son used to run through this property while a member of the cross-country team for Discovery Middle School. My school-age children also attend events at Kiggins Bowl, and I would not allow my children to run in that area or attend events without parent supervision if it became a homeless encampment, that word, attracting houseless people and the drug issues that often accompany this segment of the population, unfortunately. Stay safe communities make more sense in locations where homeless people are present in force already, offering a safer alternative to people with the hope of reducing crime and drug use. It makes sense in locations where parents would already hesitate to let children be without supervision. I believe creating a homeless encampment at this location would only increase crime in the immediate area. It will definitely decrease the livability of a legacy neighborhood in Vancouver and an area that children use freely right now. Misguided compassion is leading many cities in the Pacific Northwest, including ours, to solutions that aren't working. I'm a single mom in the city, and a recently passed tax increase for affordable housing that many don't see as affordable puts some property taxpayers closer to not being able to make ends meet without government assistance. It decreases my ability to plan and save for my family's future needs and for my retirement. There are also several examples of encampments with and without government participation that are not working out as hoped or well. Just this week, I read a number of stories about camps making cities less livable. The Washington State Department of Transportation says Camp Hope in Spokane will be closed next month. The camp has hurt the neighborhood with a spike in crime and open-air drug use in the neighborhood, as well as declining business activity, given the safety concerns. In Burien, a homeless encampment in the center of downtown is spiraling out of control. Sweep signs indicate it is scheduled to be cleared on May 31. And before the group of campers moved here from the City Hall area and library grounds, the corner lot had been used by the neighborhood as an unofficial dog park. Neighboring Portland is experiencing a population decrease, in part caused by its homelessness and some surrounding drug problems. An article in the Post Millennial quotes Sarah Holland, the director of supportive housing for the nonprofit Central City Concern, saying, "If you're a drug addict on the streets of Portland and you get free food, free housing, free water, free needles, and have $2 of fentanyl, why would you put yourself into treatment if you don't have to go?" Portland reports a 50% increase in homelessness from 2019 to 2022, and it is also embarking on opportunities like this. Our own experience with the now closed Navigation Center in Vancouver gives us writing on the wall of the impact that city-sanctioned homeless priority places have on a surrounding area. What Washington State cities are doing, fueled by misguided compassion, is not working. It is not compassionate to make it easier for people to live on the streets. It is compassionate to help people access more formal shelter, job assistance, and needed treatment to help rebuild their lives. When I did public relations,
we just have a lot of other questions. So
I'll wrap up. I can wrap up. I wanted to say that when I did public relations work for a nonprofit homeless shelter in town, Open House Ministries, the former resident, the homeless residents there who were in the shelter told me that if they had a choice between keeping their families on the streets doing and ability to do drugs, if they had that choice between that and the shelter, they would have chosen the former. It was because the choice was between a shelter and no drug use or jail and no drug use that they made the better decision and were happy to be rebuilding their lives. I wanted to say there are a few notes earlier in the meeting. Lon said there's great success with other stay safe communities. I'd love to hear what great success is and how many people have been permanently housed compared with how many are still in the communities or exist are back on the streets.
Okay.
Also, Amy said they were equally distributed or equitably distributed, but having one just a few miles south downtown, 2 miles, I think 2.5, and one here is not an equitable distribution. That puts two stay safe communities within the daily ongoings of many people in my neighborhood. Thanks for hearing me out. I'm happy to help you with any resources or research about government-aided homeless encampments. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dina, and I really appreciate your sharing
I think your
what
hand.
you're hopeful about and the concerns that you have. And just want to check in, Jamie, is there anything you want to share about the success question that she had?
Yes, there was a whole lot of
stuff you want to share.
so I wanted to try to touch up on a few things. So for I'm still working on 1-year data for site 2, but because their 1 year just ended. But for our first site, we served a total of 80 individuals at that site, and 33 of them moved into permanent housing within that year. For some of them, it took 3 months. For some of them, it took 9-10 months. But that's actually on par, if not greater than the success rate of any other shelter in this county, publicly funded shelter. I'm sure Open House they have a different model with like transitional housing and all of that attached to it. So there's that. I can also say that that calls for service for police and emergency services has reduced 30% in the areas where our safe stays are located. And that's because we have created now a safer managed location that once did not exist for people camping in those areas. I can also say that as of 2 weeks ago, there were 2 tents on this exact property. So it's just not entirely accurate that people are not camping there or around it, because people were camping on it just 2 weeks ago. And frequently there are people camping along I-5 there, along the fence line, which, as Carly mentioned earlier, they sometimes will come and remove folks. And then they will come back, and we will repeat that over and over again. And this will kind of eliminate that challenge.
Great, thank you. Daniel, was there anything that you wanted to add from what you heard that you wanted to provide information or share perspective?
Sorry, give it a sense to collect my thoughts here. Regarding like do good success, it's always people see success through housing placements, is kind of like a quick, easy one. So last year, Do Good placed 199 individuals into permanent housing. We had a goal of 200, and we came up to 199, fell just short. This year we had a goal of 300, and right now we're at 275 folks into permanent housing. I know our goal here in Vancouver is like we'll still figure out what our metrics will be and things to hope for. But I have quite a few people who currently work at other nonprofits here in Vancouver who want to come work for Do Good and are eager to use their skill sets and their knowledge of the local nonprofits and the resources that the city already offers to serve this neighborhood. And so while I hear that, you might not think it's going to be super successful, I would beg to differ. And so I'm very hopeful for it. Yeah.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is we'll take the question from Emily, and then I'll cover some of the questions in the chat.
Thanks for having this meeting. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate. Unlike Dina, I did not come with prepared statement, I mostly came to gather information and was really pleased with everything that I've heard. I have also been a single mother in the past. My kids are all adults now. I live within less than a mile of this proposed site and am a member and an elder at First Presbyterian Church. I fully support this as a site. I do see homeless people in this area. I do know that they are present with us every day, and we need to be providing services. I think anything that we can do as a community to bring people out of this homeless situation and into a more safe and fulfilling life that contributes to the community, we need to do. So 100% I support it, and I would be happy to participate in any way I can.
All right. Well, thank you, Emily, for sharing your perspective and your support. What I'm going to do now is just take a look at the chat and just pose these questions. There's a question here around concern that the 1,000 feet camping ban would not affect a homeless encampment near Leverage Park. So, you know, question about how is this actually solving the concerns there? Jamie, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So people are not supposed to be camping in Leverage Park at all, as well as that general area of the Burnt Bridge Creek. What I can, however, tell you is that no matter how many times we go in and clear those camps, because we've done so now several times, when they don't have an alternative place to go, they're going to go camp wherever they can find a location to camp. It's why it's so important to provide alternatives to camping. So I suppose that would be my response to that. If we're going to remove the ability to live outdoors, we have to provide alternatives.
Okay. So if that didn't touch upon your concerns, please, that's iPhone 3. Please let us know. Ask another question around that. Eve, I see your hand, but I want to ask a few more of these questions on the chat just to balance it out, but we'll get to you. There was a question about whether having site near a neighborhood would decrease value. And Jamie's answered that that hasn't been the experience. Housing value has not been decreased. And also, it looks like there's not be long enough to see the full impact of that. Question about whether parking will be allowed. And I see that it's been answered. Yes, there'll be parking for staff and people with vehicles. And Craig has also put in some specific concerns here that I won't read out loud right now, but definitely concerns about having the site near children and families. And questions about police patrol. So maybe we can speak to what the police presence will be if the site isn't being operated. Not quite sure who I should direct that one to.
Nancy, I'd be happy to talk on that, but I think I see Officer Gelsinger here. He is the neighborhood police officer for this location, and I'd be more happy to just defer to Officer Gelsinger.
Thanks, Chief. I'm here this time. Yeah, so police presence will be just like any other police presence in District 1. If there's a crime that we need to respond to, we'll certainly have officers available to respond to those urgent needs. But as far as officers dedicated on site, that's not necessary. And it's not really practical for the needs of our entire community. We wouldn't be providing just a special officer for that safe stay.
Okay.
I would follow up on that just a little bit as the HART officer that's been around since before the initial safe stay 1, 2 in our safe park. As Jamie mentioned earlier, the areas where those were at, police calls for service actually dropped. So there was a less of a need for officers or police response after that. And part of that is because they're managed 24/7 by civilians who are on site who are contracted to be there, and they call. So there are additional eyes and ears when there's issues. And it doesn't take long before, people who are engaged in behavior that don't want to be around the police figure that out. And so they stay away from the area. Conversely, we do get called to those areas when there are tents or people vehicle camping that pop up within that 1,000-foot buffer, partly because the folks in the neighborhood like yourself have been educated and realize that that's a city ordinance and that we'll enforce it. So we do go out and we actually address those pretty quickly, because we're committed to making sure that the safe stays are successful, and that we don't just create an ordinance, and shine people on, so to speak. So I'm one of the officers that's directly responsible for making sure those people that are within 1,000 feet get their, notice to vacate that area. We do outreach and engagement with them as well, to either try to get them into a safe stay or other services available as we can. So yeah, as Lee said, Officer Gelsinger, when the police are called, we're going to respond, whether it ends up being a neighborhood police officer, myself, or routine patrol, depending on what the call is.
Thank you. So if you have follow-up questions, please feel free to submit them or raise your hand. Why don't you go ahead, Eve? Thank you so much for your patience.
I don't know how to
Sure.
It's pain, it should say.
Somebody's got their thing on it, so I can't hear. So, okay, so I live right at the top of the hill. I'm at 44th and Washington Street. And so I'm like a block from here, which is outside of the 1,000 feet mark. I already currently have cars that get parked in front of my house or in front of where the electric company has an easement between my property and my neighbor's property. And there's always crap back there, or people, I mean, I had to trim my arborvitae up because people used to sleep under my arborvitaes in front of my house. So, and so far, we have been fortunate in this neighborhood, okay, because this is like, we are the people. The apartment complex down this, right across the street from this proposed site, apparently doesn't have enough parking, and there's no parking on that, on 45th Street, which is the street that's going to lead right into this thing, right? There's no parking, and we just had a bike thing put in here that was like another parking, takeaway parking, access for bicycles. So we have cars that get parked around that don't actually live here. Okay, so that's like a big problem. And so you're saying, so they won't be able to camp within 1,000 feet, which just means they're going to come to the top of the hill and now they're going to camp here. So that's like obviously a concern that I have. And, I was going to say that so far, every time somebody has camped, yeah, it's been great that y'all have been clearing them. Thank you, police. I love the police, frankly. I like that y'all keep it clean, and it's like, and it does feel safe. Leverage Park has been a nightmare with needles and et cetera. And what I see here is that you're not requiring sobriety for people to stay in this place, which just means those people who aren't interested in sobriety are still going to be shooting up wherever, doing whatever, wherever. And now they just won't do it there, but they'll probably do it up here because this will now be the next new safe place that they can do it, away from a safe place. So it's like, yeah, I kind of feel like until now it's been mostly on the other side of I-5. Why are we bringing it to this side of I-5, west of I-5, in this part of the neighborhood where it has been safe, where we have been able to ride our bikes, where we have been able to, we used to walk. I used to walk from my house and go underneath and go to Leverage and through and do that Bird Creek Trail. No more. I haven't done that in a while because it's not been safe. So I don't really want this moving closer. On the other hand, I get that it's like, as opposed to just random camping, yeah, the safe space idea is preferred, and I made probably the mistake, and the universe heard me say, like, God, if I had to have one or the other, I'd rather have this. But that doesn't mean I really want this. And I guess my question is, it's like the city and all their wisdom and all the leaders and all the people on this call, it's like, how close do any of you live to one of these things? Are you like within a block of, are you like, I'm literally the next street over? Are any of you that close to it? And then kind of, how do you feel? How would you feel about it? It's like, it's like a problem that I only a little bit have now. You're talking about making it in a way, potentially making it worse, because what these people do during the day when they're not in their little shelter is roam around. And now they're just going to be roaming around, checking my yard, if I got my you know, we don't even put our bins out anymore because people are like gonna go through it. You know, it's like, I just see it as kind of getting worse. And so the question about what's the criteria to actually be in the place? Yeah, I'm all for helping somebody who's trying to help themselves, who's, you know, trying to get forward and that we want to get them housed. I'm all for that, but I don't know that that's actually who we're putting in here. I don't know. I don't really know who we're putting in these.
So you have a lot of concern about, you've had some impacts and concern about that becoming worse.
Correct. I mean, we already got parking problems, and I just don't want more cars parked and now they're camper cars. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then we had a series of questions. So,
Yes.
you know, one was whether any of the city team that's helping, you know, put this together, whether they are close to any of these sites and what their experience has been. There's also a question around the folks that will be living at these sites, your concern of like, where will they go during the day and what's been the experience? And I think now we've got some history, so perhaps there's some information there. And so maybe we can just start with that. Is there anybody from the city that can speak to the experience?
I'm not real good at this, but am I heard here? Hello?
Yeah, we're just finishing answering a question, sir.
I don't know how to handle this here. I'm Cheryl Pulver, or I'm Rob Pulver, Cheryl, and I met with Jamie today. I live in Long Beach. I just got home. I drove 6 hours to check this out.
Okay.
I own the property, the Frontier Public House.
Okay.
I've owned that for 23 years. And I've had it even when it wasn't so good. Could have used a lot of help from the city to make things right, but nevertheless, it's a good restaurant right now. Anybody that's seen anything has seen the changes that have gone on. I got there, like I say, 23 years ago. I've seen lots of changes, good changes happening to that area. A whole neighborhood built down there on the corner, the big new, high-rise apartment building that they just put in there, the shabbier, used to be apartments down lower. They've re-roofed them, put asphalt in there, cleaned that neighborhood all up. The apartments, questionable, but they're better than they used to be. I'm right by the women's shelter, and the bus stop's right in front of that property. I would love nothing more for that bus stop to go away. I have asked C-Tran before, would they move that bus stop one building down in front of the homeless shelter or the shelter? They say it's an act of God to do that. The people that use that bus stop are from that shelter. My place is a business. It serves people with nice cars and tax-paying people. I've had all kinds of vandalism, needles, the whole thing. That shelter has a rule. Now this is a two-part thing, man. I say I got off because I didn't know if people could hear me. Part one is property, and part two is how is our tax dollars being spent. But on the property issue, I'm going to be right on the line. One may think I don't have a beef because I'm under the umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, the homeless shelter does not look to be under that umbrella. They have a rule that says anybody visiting there or anybody dropping somebody off cannot park on their property. So consequently, they park on my parking lot. And when they leave their needles and their diapers and all their garbage and their trash. And if you politely go out there and ask them to please not be there, I get the finger and called all kinds of nasty names and threatening. So I do believe that Jamie's operation, the people will be decent and good folks. And I think within the 1,000-foot area, since 80% of that is freeway, that is one of my concerns, is the safety. Because you have a freeway exit, a freeway entrance, you have Hazeldale Avenue, and then you have Hazeldale, and Main Street is 2 lanes up and 2 lanes down, 4 lanes. So I'm just really concerned that people with mental issues, everybody involved in this, bottom line, they have mental issues. You would not be in your situation if you were thinking clearly. But to have them around that big traffic intersection. Now I know it's thought that they're going to walk to the top of the hill to do their thing, but I Googled it. It's 3 minutes for them to walk from this new site to that bus stop. And we live in the Northwest. It's damp here. It does rain. You know, they're going to walk over to my facility. You know, the city makes me put trees and shrubs, and I have to run things correctly. When the bus stops, they leave their needles and their just all their garbage and everything. It's picked up every day, just to keep the place nice. If I didn't pick it up, there'd be no patrons there. They're afraid to go around that. And so what my fear about some of that is I'm under the umbrella, that's good. But just take 2 steps outside of that. Now I'm dealing with a society that isn't under the umbrella. Before this all came and they did that walkthrough, that whole wall on the north side, they graffitied that. Well, they graffitied my building also. Consequently, I went out and painted it and covered it up. All of the issues I've had to take care of it myself. They throw rocks through the windows. They throw rocks through my sign. They bust the sign. They damage my property. And the city's not coming to help me. Nobody gives me a handout or anything like that. Now, again, Jamie's people, I believe, will be good. But that bus stop's going to drop people off that walk up to Main Street or go back to Hazeldale down lower where they came from. They had a fire there last year, just north of Hazeldale there on the homeless camp. So,
Mr. Pulver, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up just so we can make sure we hear from others. So,
excuse me.
It sounds like safety. I said I wanted to ask you to, if you can wrap it up just so that we can make sure there's enough space for others. But it sounds like for you, it's the main concern is safety. And again, similar to Eve, what the impact will be to bring this site when you've already had other impacts regarding that shelter. It's what I'm hearing you want people to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I will wrap this up. I have voiced before and I don't know how it goes, but I've read that they use dog parks. Since this is a temporary thing, it's only supposed to be for 3 years, correct? Yes. Why not go to the dog park? It's just up the hill. It is public property. It's not on a main throughway with cars, and there's over 30,000 cars drive up and down that road. I only know this because the sign people share that with you when they're trying to sell you a sign. High traffic right off that freeway exit. It's just, yeah, I'm a safety thing for that, but I'm also, is this really fixing the problem or kicking the can down the road? I'm of the feeling it's kicking the can down the road. I think that we have more mental issues going on there than, like I say, if you have any of those problems, whether it be alcohol or IV drugs or any kind of drugs, opium, whatever, crack or however you do it, you need to rethink yourself. Your brain is not working well. So I just think, what do we do with these mental people? Now, I've heard we don't have no place to put them, right? So
are you willing to hear just maybe a response from Daniel about some of your questions?
It's kind of broken up. I don't know if that's me or you, but
yeah, I'm not sure if it's me. Could be me. Daniel, would you be willing to speak to the case management, the sort of how you deal with mental illness, drug problems? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think, we need to be careful with assumptions being made that everyone is a drug addict or has mental health. While it is definitely an issue, I think it's not a good idea to assume everyone is struggling with those issues. However, our staff is trained and we do de-escalation and harm reduction. And, this is something that we work on monthly and have monthly trainings on doing along with case management. you know, I want to recognize and hear your fear in this. But you know, I just, you know, I just don't agree. I'll just leave it there. So, you know.
But are there, if folks do come in and need support, how does?
I'm sorry, you broke up.
Did she leave? She might have lost her connection.
Yeah,
I
Dana,
can, so I
yeah,
can
sorry, go ahead.
actually give some information in regards to this. So it is true that there are some folks living outside that have very significant challenges, very significant mental health issues, severe, persistent. There are people who have pretty severe substance use challenges for, you know, for whatever reason. But I will tell you, we don't bring people into this site, into any of our sites, that don't want to be there. Number one, the people who come in here, because we don't have the shelter capacity or the housing to legally be able to force anyone into shelter at this point in our community. So the people who are coming in are choosing to come in, and they are wanting to come in because they would like assistance and they would like support. We have yet to have somebody come in where they were just so challenged that we could not meet their needs. In fact, many people have come in and been able to stabilize enough to get their mental health or substance use or physical health needs met, to get on medication, to access treatment, to go to detox, to exit into recovery housing. And that kind of turnaround is very difficult, if not impossible for some, to do from a tent outside.
I think it's muted. Cheryl.
I'm just looking to see real quick if Nancy's back.
Culver, you're muted.
That is okay. Thank you, Jamie.
My question was, do you drug test before they come in, or
No.
is it kind of just a question answer thing?
Sure, it's a question answer thing, but my team, which I said in the chat here, my team and other outreach teams, but mostly my team, does the bulk of the referrals into this site. So Officer Chavers, and then I've got another 2 team members who aren't here tonight with us, but and so we know these folks pretty intimately. We know what their challenges are, we know what their strengths are, we know what their wishes for themselves are, and so that's a process that we start way out in their encampment. You know, what do you need help with? What are your barriers? What do you want to work on? What do you need to work on? That all begins before we even refer into one of these sites. But when someone is ready, and they want to go in and they've identified, you know, some barriers that they need to work on, then they get referred in. And then Daniel's team in this site, for example, would talk to them about what those barriers are and then work to connect them with whatever supports are needed to get over that hump and into some stability.
Are there no empty office spaces downtown Vancouver that we could do a better job with helping everybody rather than just a small few?
So that's a great question. And I will say, when I was kind of first coming up with like our overall plan, I researched a ton of different shelter models and village models and all of that. And there were also a lot of lessons learned from the Navigation Center. I don't know if anybody was here for the Navigation Center, if you remember it, but there were a lot of challenges with the Navigation Center. I was an outreach worker back then and had many clients who utilized the Navigation Center, but I could tell you, as someone who worked with those folks and cared deeply for them, I did not find the space as it was to be a healthy space for the people that I worked with, nor did I find it healthy for the neighborhood that it was in. And that's for a number of reasons. One of them being it was the only one and it was not 24/7. So because it was the only one, it served basically the entire Vancouver, Clark County homeless population. And so everyone kind of converged on this one location, this small neighborhood, which the neighborhood was not equipped for. And because people needed those services, they camped very nearby. So a lot of the things that we implement with these sites, like that 1,000-foot no camping buffer, keeping them small, spacing them around the city, these are all lessons learned from the navigation center. We want to spread them around, make sure that we're not dumping anything on any one particular neighborhood. We're keeping them small so that it's not a huge impact to a neighborhood, and the people living on the site or in the site really get a lot of the kind of one-on-one supports that they need without it kind of turning into chaos, which large sites can do, just like large apartment complexes, frankly.
So you have the YMCA out in Orchards where folks can go take care of their showering needs and whatnot like that, right? How are they going to take care of hygiene in this new site? Is there I don't know. I mean, I didn't research it, but is there a place nearby that can help these folks?
So we are in the middle of a request for proposal process right now. We have contracts going in front of council on Monday for shower and restroom facilities. So for some of our sites, they'll need something more mobile, like a trailer with full-size restrooms and showers, and some can do some other kinds. But this site would likely need one of the trailers because it's set so far back from the road, so far away from sewer. And that would be fully self-contained. So the dump tanks and the water tanks would be included with the trailer. So there will be potentially showers. If we use this site, there will be showers and restrooms on site.
So Jimmy, it looked like other people have a thing, but I do have a legal question or whatever, probably for a police officer. Don't we have laws on the books already to keep these people moving? I mean, this has been a 400-year issue. This isn't the first time any community's ever experienced homelessness. Vagrancy laws changed, what, in 1972, which allowed them to stay on city property? Am I wrong on that? Or
this is Nancy again. Sorry, folks, I got kicked out. So not by the Zoom, but by my own internet and computer. So I apologize, and thank you, William, for stepping up, I believe.
Not to worry. Nancy, just to let you know kind of where we were at is Mr. Pulver was asking a question. Also looks like John, the user's name is John Combs there, but they had their hand up, so I want to make sure we go to them. But just briefly, if we could, if Officer Chambers, if you're available, that I think would be a great question for you to respond to. And for some reason, Officer Chambers is not another member of VPD, can certainly speak to kind of the current legal landscape about how the city responds to unsheltered camping.
Yeah.
Officer Chambers, are you there?
Sorry, yes, I just jumped off the phone. I apologize, but you have to repeat the question.
Sure. It was just about what is kind of the law when it comes to camping outdoors, and how does the city handle folks camping on public property?
So the ordinances are still in place with regards to the unlawful camping, unlawful storage of property, and some others that basically, unless you are an unsheltered person, you probably aren't going to end up violating. The specific ordinances have timeframes, so it's a little weird for officers because most crimes are crimes all the time. Theft is theft. It's not like you can thieve for a certain period of time and not another period of time. But with camping, due to federal case law born out of Idaho, which is the same district that Washington resides in as far as appeals courts and all that, they weren't able to, when I say they, policymakers, lawmakers were not able to eliminate or make camping illegal at all times in all places. So there is ability to restrict some camping in some specific places, for instance, critical or sensitive areas like waterways, be able to articulate why it's important to prohibit camping at all times within 1,000 feet of a safe stay, and those sorts of things. And then with regards to the time limits, it's, I believe, from 6:30 in the morning until 9:30 at night, it's prohibited. So daytime camping, unless you're a nighttime worker and have an exemption. So people say, why don't you arrest them? Well, with 500 people, give or take, unsheltered outdoors in the city limits at any given time, We just simply don't have the police resources nor the jail resources, nor is it as an answer. It might displace folks temporarily, but it's not an answer or solution to homelessness. So really, it's a tool from a policy perspective where we will look at what's going on with a person individually, because all crimes are individual. I can't punish you for something your neighbor is doing. So we'll look at what an individual is doing or engaged in. We'll go through a process of education, warning, citing, and then physical arrest if necessary. And so that's the progression that gives people an opportunity to learn or understand what's available to them as far as resources or as far as their behavior that's not only unwanted, but it's actually unlawful. And then if they actually do comply, great, voluntary compliance is cheap. If they don't, and we have to continue to spend more time or resources with somebody as we walk through that process, then we will actually get to the point where we cite people into court. If a citation doesn't work, we can physically arrest, but due to the level of crime, has nothing to do with the police department. It has to do with how jail capacity and rules on incarceration work. They may spend a night in jail or two for low-level misdemeanor offense. But truly, to add a little bit to the question, what I've seen really working most recently is that there's a brand new community court, which is a therapeutic court. I won't go on too long, but some folks maybe have heard of things like drug court or veterans court or mental health court. And it's courts where rather than just jail someone and use punitive action, a fine or jail time, or making them go out and do work crew cleanup stuff in order to serve restitution or whatever for their criminal behavior, the courts have recognized that in some cases, the underlying issues, whether it's drug addiction or mental health, or that somebody is a veteran and has prior trauma in their life, which tends to color their world in a way where they're engaged in criminal behavior in order to survive outside, whether it's homelessness or otherwise. Courts were developed to drive at the root causes of why someone continues to recidivism, within the criminal justice system, in order to actually solve the problem, to get that person over that barrier, that hump they're experiencing. And so within our community, it took about 5 years to bring service providers, the courts, defense attorneys, prosecutors, and everybody to the table and kind of hammer out what community court would look like. And so about 8 weeks ago, we began citing people into community court for camping violations, storage of property, other things that they're engaged in. What's happening with that is, I would tell you that even if we only have a 50% success rate, that's 1,000,000% more than 0%, before it existed. So right now, what we have are the folks who are actually coming and engaging and graduating or moving through the process is, in my words, layman's terms, they're getting unstuck. A lot of folks that are homeless outdoors for various reasons are just stuck in their homelessness. They're afraid to lose their stuff. They're afraid to leave, to go to an appointment, to engage with outreach because they don't have a stable, safe environment like a safe stay to actually launch off of. And so we're using the community court in an effort to leverage the threat of arrest or jail or losing their property with going through the court system to actually do housing assessments, find out that there's actually funding. A lot of folks outdoors have access to Social Security or SSI or other forms of income that they've earned and deserve, but they don't have the wherewithal to fill out the paperwork or understand the process to engage in those areas. And when they do, and you marry that up with something like a housing voucher, their opportunities expand exponentially for being able to get in. So that's kind of a full circle with regards to how policy overlaps with what the law strictly says, and the fact that it's kind of like the question is, why don't we stop all speeders on I-5? We just don't have the resources. We stop the most egregious ones, and when WSP is out there, everybody jams on their brakes because they don't want a ticket. So we address basically homelessness through a criminal lens with the light touch, so that we're not butting up against the violation of civil rights, which is a whole separate issue. civil rights violations happen regardless of whether you're homeless or housed or otherwise within the criminal justice community. It's just a little more sensitive when you're dealing with people and property in a public space who otherwise their mere presence, can be a violation of law. So like I said, the courts take a very dim view, Department of Justice takes a very dim view on simply forcing people to move around. Disparaging terms or things like herding cattle and stuff like that. When we start to treat human beings as otherwise than, and we're the government, it's the deep pockets of the community that end up hurting, and we are responsible for that and don't want to go there. So we're careful with the application, but we cited 2 people today, this morning, and we'll continue to cite folks.
Thank you so much for that overview, especially of the therapeutic court. There may be people that are not aware of that. So thank you for hoping people understand what's available and what's the lay of the land legally. Thank you so much, the Combs, for your patience. And if you'd like to ask your question now, let's go forward.
Hi, thanks, Nancy. So I'm John Combs and my wife, Jerry Combs. We live just up the hill also, up 45th on 46th Street. So we did put a question into the chat, and thank you, Daniel and Jamie, for addressing that. I would like to hear a few more comments from both of you, and our question and concerns revolve around the selection process for Do Good Multnomah for this oversight and management on this project. Because of the issues with the Sandy Studios project that they were involved with, which had notably very serious problems that got to the point of a fraud investigation. So I'm sure there were lessons learned from that, and I'm sure there was lots of conversation between Daniel and Jamie, but I would like to hear a little more detail about how that vetting was happened, especially since there were really serious issues with that. Obviously, if they had not been addressed, there's no way that this organization would have been selected for this role. So it seems like that information should be out there and be public and be talked about, how this process happened to select this organization, to reassure us that people have learned lessons and are going to move forward. And part of what seemed to be lacking in that with the Sandy Studios, when there were multiple organizations involved, government, non-government, and no one was overseeing anyone else. There were responsibilities being subcontracted or handed out, and everybody just thought everybody else was doing their job, and there was lack of connection and communication and responsibility and oversight. So I'm hoping to hear that those shortcomings have been recognized and that there are solutions for that put in place for this upcoming project.
Sure. John, I sent you a private message just so
I saw that. Thank you.
That we could talk offline about this. But here we are. So for those who don't know, Sandy Studios was a permanent supportive housing project here in Portland. It was 50 units that was for veterans only. This building was a bit unique and a bit of a pioneer process where the county took built an old motel and transferred it and turned it into studio apartments, which when you are serving this clientele, it's not the best solution to do so. However, this building, when Do Good took it over in late 2018, we expressed that this building was not up to par and not conducive to house individuals, especially some of the most vulnerable veterans in the city of Portland. We communicated this to the VA, to Home Forward, which is our housing bureau or whatever, and then and to the Joint Office of Homeless Services. And from the next few years, we advocated every year that this building was not conducive to house individuals, to the point where we got the city involved and eventually got the building red tagged. I think what you are talking about, this the fraud situation, was this money that about $800,000 that got brought up. So Do Good was the middleman in this, and where we paid the owner of the building, his name is Ganesh, we paid him $48,000 every month to house these veterans in, and the property management company would then collect the rents. But just so you all know, Do Good's involvement was there to provide strictly support services. We did not collect the rents. We did not own the building. We were just there for the veterans to make sure that they maintained their housing and that they were successful in it. When COVID hit in late 2020, early 2020, everyone disappeared. The VA disappeared. They no longer showed up. Other nonprofits disappeared, no longer showed up. Home Forward no longer showed up. And all that was left was the 4 staff members that worked there to continue to provide support to these veterans. And I think the rest you can look up and read, but the building was eventually condemned and we transferred everyone to a motel, and then every single one had found permanent housing through Do Good. So I know on the news and in articles you could read and it sounds pretty awful, but I will stand on whatever box that I have and say that this program was one of Do Good's finest moments, to where everyone abandoned these 50 veterans. Sorry, a little emotional, but Do Good and the staff there stayed and made sure that all of these 50 veterans had a home after no one else cared. And so, John, I hear you and I appreciate your comment. And, I want everyone here to know that Do Good is audited twice a year by a third-party auditor and by the Joint Office of Household Services. Every single penny is always accounted for. We have to have receipts for every single penny that we spent. And it'll be the same with the City of Vancouver, that when we invoice every month, that we have to show that how we spent every penny. And so this is how it works here in Portland as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it goes a long way towards answering it. Thank you. And but I would like to hear, and I guess in addition, I mean, it sounds like you were in an extremely difficult and awkward situation because of what happened during COVID. And, hopefully that's not going to repeat itself. But are there things that you are insisting in your arrangement with the organizations here to help prevent situations like you saw in the past that put you in such a difficult situation, and obviously had an impact on those veterans too, which obviously you care deeply about. So what are you, when you came to the table with the organizations here to develop this contract, what were some of the things that you insisted upon that would set you up and set the project up for success, based upon your experience with Sandy Studios?
Yeah, I think it's really important that these are 2 totally separate models of sheltering. One is permanent sort of housing, and this one is, tiny homes, alternative sheltering, a village. And so it's kind of comparing apples to oranges a little bit on this. And so what Do Good can bring to the table to make sure that we're successful is that we currently already operate 2 other villages, one in Clackamas County called the Veterans Village and one in St. John's. John, if you'd like to see either one, I'd love to give you a tour. That goes for everyone here. And then plus, many motel programs and congregate shelter programs. So that experience is what makes us successful when we go and talk to Jamie and the other folks in the city. But I also say that Jamie knows her stuff. The City of Vancouver, they know their stuff. And so it wasn't really much of a negotiation. It was just, we were all on the same table at the same page at the very beginning. So.
Yeah, I want to explain one of those differences is particularly during COVID, but one of those differences is that when people are living in these sites, the safe stay communities, they are shelter residents. They are not tenants that get the benefit of landlord-tenant law situations. So when someone's living in a housing situation, landlords, property owners, etc., cannot just go into someone's home, particularly during a pandemic, right? Because those rules are kind of even more extreme. But when you have issues of hoarding, bed bugs, all those kinds of things that you'd like to address, there are a lot more protections for actual tenants than those who are just living in a shelter. I can tell you that at our safe stays, once a week, we have staff knocking on everyone's doors to make sure that the emergency exits are clear and that the smoke alarm and carbon monoxide detectors are working. And that's also just a way to make sure that we're getting face-to-face engagement with everybody, and can kind of see the conditions that people are living in, because these are not homes, full homes. These are just shelter units. So I don't anticipate the same kind of challenges that happened in those units in these at all. And I am as I mentioned in the comments, I am a very hands-on, out in the field contract overseer and manager. I visit these sites, all of our sites, every single week. So I know exactly what's going on in every one of these sites, all the time. I'm very close with the staff that work at these sites. They know how to get a hold of me directly. And it's very important to me, both for the surrounding neighborhood, but also the people who live in these sites, many of whom I know and have known for many years in my work as an outreach worker. It's very important to me that the conditions they are living in are healthy and supportive. Same for the surrounding neighborhood.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. I hear your dedication and your commitment, and I certainly applaud that. Please reassure me that this is organizational too, that these are your responsibilities on paper and in your job description, and there are other people's responsibilities too, that this doesn't just come from personal commitment. And if you move on to something else, if somebody takes you away because of your talents, is the structure still there to have this oversight and left hand following right hand every other day like you're doing
all
now?
of these expectations are baked into the provider contracts for every site.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your response. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you for raising those questions to go deeper into the responsibilities and the financial concerns and agency concerns. So there are a couple questions on the chat. Looks like folks are busy trying to respond to them. One question was there a couple questions around the criteria for people to be able to be placed in a safe stay home. So I think we've touched upon that a little bit, Daniel. And I know we've talked, there's been some conversation about like what those requirements were, but maybe you can just outline that a little bit further for folks.
Mm-hmm. So, I think first clear that we don't serve children is criteria number one. And then through the referral process with Jamie, they'll help identify folks who they think will be successful as a referral. I'm sure they have their own assessment for that. And then before anyone comes into the village, they'll have to go through a background screening process, which will, as I said earlier, will screen out those who are sex offenders and who have been convicted of violent crimes. And then part of a good referral would be someone who is who wants to be housed, is willing to engage with our case managers and our team. That's part of the criteria is, we have part of our intake packet is simply being a good community member, and that there's a long list of things that include in there of just how they conduct themselves outside of the shelter or the village, and then how they conduct themselves within the village as well. And then meeting with our case managers and being engaged, because at the end of the day, it's a partnership with participants that, they need to meet us halfway for them to be successful. And if that's something they don't want to do, then this isn't the right program for them.
Okay.
Answer your question.
So there are guidelines. Someone was curious about whether there's rules that the residents would have to follow. And that's what I'm hearing is that you have some commitment. You ask.
I know one of the questions I read in the chat, we talked about if they have to be sober to live there, and we don't drug test anyone coming in. However, part of our good neighbor agreement is we don't have people doing drugs or alcohol on site, so that is a rule.
Okay.
But we don't test anyone.
Okay. All right. So I don't know if there were, my chat got cut off from when I joined. So if any questions that weren't addressed that you see, William?
Yeah, well, yeah, just going off of Daniel's kind of last comment, there was a question earlier about sort of how the best way to probably describe it is how we balance, right? I can make sure there's accountability, right, alongside compassion. And Jamie, I was just curious if you could speak to sort of how we have handled it, right, when there's been someone has stolen something, right, or brought materials in or drugs into a safe state community, or if there's been conflicts between residents. How have providers in the city handled that?
Certainly, that, I mean, it's been different. It's been different for each person in each kind of different situation. When it comes to things like so one of the things that we've had at Site One, or at least we used to, not so much anymore, but when we first opened, we had folks who were taking other people's food because we have refrigerators on these sites. So we would have a situation where somebody was drinking somebody else's milk. And that's certainly not something that someone's going to be immediately exited for because people are coming in with pretty significant food insecurity. So that's something that we have at our other sites been able to just kind of hash out as a community. So we have weekly community meetings there where we talk about weekly and daily just kind of resident issues, and some of the residents vote on some of their own rules around that kind of thing. But then we have some very hard and fast things, like violence of any kind. We don't allow, like hateful, bigoted language used, or threats, things like that. We have some hard lines around things like that. That would include like open drug use at the site there. That would have to be an exit because that's a hard no. However, there are people who I know are using when they come in, like upon not like in the site, but I know that they have a substance use issue as they're coming into this site. But it's something, because we've talked about it already, that they've said they'd like to work on. So are we requiring sobriety the moment they come in? No, because that's not likely. People don't just kick in one day. That's not a thing. Certainly it is, though, something that we're going to help with. So whether that's going and getting a mental health or a substance use eval and then following the recommendations of that, or just immediately helping them get into detox and holding their bed for when they come back. We've also held people's beds when they've gone to like a 28-day stay, because that's a big challenge in shelters in general, is that if somebody goes inside, decides they want to go to treatment, shelters at other places do not hold their beds. So then they're exiting right back to the streets, and then it's like lather, rinse, repeat. So we try to address each of those kinds of situations very individually, and to make sure there's as few barriers to success there as possible. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. That's really helpful.
Yeah. And there's still a concern by Dina that, what is to stop folks from using drugs in the parks or the schools away from the site. So I don't know if you've had any experience with that with the other sites, if there's.
It's not something that I have experienced at any of the sites thus far. I mean, the laws still apply to individuals. Drugs that's on school property, that's, I'm pretty sure, a big crime. I'm not a lawyer or a police officer, but I'm pretty sure it is. And that's whether somebody is unhoused or housed, right? Because that's also something we see, is like teenagers sneaking off to do their stuff in the park and Bridge Creek or whatever. So those crimes are still crimes and would be handled by the police, just like anybody else.
Okay. And Scott also just is raising a concern that we've heard from several people of, what does this mean? Is this going to push behavior closer to me because of this site and the buffer zone? So concern about whether the adjoining areas might see increases in activity.
Again, that's not really something that I have seen, and that really largely has something to do with what areas are around you that would be considered like good camping spaces to begin with. I mean, in most places, people are not plopping down a tent right in somebody's front yard. They are seeking out places where they can kind of be undercover, not bothered, not seen most of the time. I hope that helped, but it's not really something that we have seen. And truly, as we stand these sites up, we are kind of buffering out more and more of the city where there are just fewer and fewer places where camping is allowed. Which is a challenge. That's a challenge, but it's why we need the beds.
So it sounds like just there's a request just to have some tracking, some statistics around that, if that's not already happening. Getting some numbers around that. We are we're close to just like 12 minutes out from closing out. We'll still have time for people to ask questions off the recording. But Jamie, I just wanted to check in with you to see if there's anything that you wanted to say in closing based on what you've heard today from folks.
I don't know that I have any additional stuff. I super appreciate people coming and sharing their concerns and their thoughts. I really do, because every bit of that helps me in determining how we mitigate issues, if we can mitigate any of the issues, with forward movement. How can we make this successful? Can we make it successful? All of that's very helpful to me.
Okay, great. I see Eve has a hand up. Do you want to wait until we're finished and we can? Is it a short question or?
This is a quick, direct question, actually. So with the officer, the police, so I heard, yeah, we don't have enough police to have an officer on site, blah, blah. But what about the patrols in the other sites where you have these where we have the safe shelters? Have you increased police patrols around those areas? And are you, or would you be willing to increase patrols? And I'm, selfishly thinking Washington Street, 45th Washington down to La Di Da up to Frontier. Can you do that? Or is this like something that's not possible or what? I see one shaking their head no, as in that's not going to happen.
I've been here since 2004, and I can tell you that the Vancouver Police Department's policy has always been, and my guess, unless the chief says otherwise, would continue to be, that we serve all citizens in the city of Vancouver equally, and therefore we don't give any special treatment to the waterfront or to East Vancouver, Cascade Park, or Leverage Park, or you name it. There isn't any special treatment. We respond to calls for service wherever. The city's commitment with regards to making sure that the safe stay communities are successful, it was an ordinance change by the city government, the city council, who enacted that as a new ordinance that didn't exist prior to the safe stays. And the commitment from the police department is to enforce that, just like we do other strictly prohibited areas. There's fire impact areas, there's critical areas within 200 feet of certain waterways. All parks are off limits. That's why you don't see any camping within the city of Vancouver city limits within parks, even during the pandemic. We strictly enforce that. So I'm not sure exactly how or why having an officer, I don't know how many square miles or whatever the neighborhood is, would necessarily enhance or increase any kind of enforcement there, because we already respond. We already have police officers who respond, whether it's the Vancouver Police Department or even the Clark County Sheriff's Office, if we need to have additional resources, due to whatever the nature of the call is. Again, my experience around our safe stay communities is that because we have other civilians whose literal, job is to be additional eyes and ears for what's going on with that population in the community, are calling if necessary for us to respond to even things that the neighbors in the neighborhood never see or even know about. And the reason you never see or know about it is because those individuals are calling us to those issues and we're responding and handling them. So I would just say from a policy level, the answer is no, we don't give special treatment to any neighborhood or any specific issue. We've had BNSF Railroad request special services from us. We don't do that. We've had other businesses. We've had, downtown in particular look at, and I'm just saying broad policy. I'm not saying they asked, but they looked at having an enhanced, service area in their downtown core. And they were encouraged, if they wanted to explore that, to look at a business impact area tax to increase so they could pay for those additional services. so that other people in the community aren't paying for services that are only being directed to one area, but they're not, also enjoying those services. So hopefully that would answer the question about why, that comes up quite frequently. Hey, I'm going to be out of town on vacation. Can you slide by my house? And maybe 30 years ago, that was a thing we could offer. It was kind of vacation, check on your house, make sure if your alarm went off, we were there. We don't have the, without getting into the nitty gritty, there's case law now that says you can develop a special relationship if you engage in services like that, which now opens the liability to the city and the department for providing those special, services. So essentially we don't, we provide equal service to everyone across the city. It doesn't mean we provide less. We just don't provide more, provide the same.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, sharing a little bit more detail about that perspective. So we're going to take one more question from Margaret, and then we need to close out. But if you have more questions, you can stay after we close out the meeting, and staff will be here for another half an hour to answer any more questions. So go ahead, Margaret.
Hi, so I am the associate pastor at the First Presbyterian Church across the street, and a number of representatives from our congregation are here today. So I've been really impressed with a number of organizations that are partnering together and exploring this possibility. And I was just wondering, as you are developing that partnership and exploring this location further, what would your hopes be as far as partnering further with other organizations? Like, how might we be a partner to you in this work? And then and then how might you be a partner with us as we continue to wrestle with these challenging questions facing our community together, and not only with organizations with ours, but what could other neighbors and interested parties do, and how might what other things how else might partnership develop beyond that? What would be helpful to you all as you're exploring this further?
I'm gonna let Daniel take that to see what his organization might need while I let my dog out, and then I will come back.
Yeah, I think I'll just start with this. My goal for our relationship with the neighborhood is that this neighborhood is proud to have this village being associated with it. And so my hopes is that there will be community events, whether that's barbecues, picnics, potlucks, those types of things where the neighborhood can be involved in bringing everyone together to kind of eliminate assumptions and fears, and that kind of everyone's we're all human beings here, and so that is a bit of the goal. But partnering with churches and business owners of donations and things like that, yes, absolutely. We can, as we get a little closer to opening date, we kind of figure out what would be the best donation at the time, and whether it's bedding or toothbrushes and hygiene products or clothing. We can chat about that when we get a little bit closer. But I think Do Good is all about having partnerships with the community, and so we're looking forward to doing that. I'll be a part of the neighborhood association meetings once a month, if you all have that, and so we can always make sure that there is conversation happening. We'll also develop a good neighbor agreement too, so we're all on the same page of appropriate communication methods and kind of what you can expect from Do Good and what we can expect from you all and from the city. And so yeah, I think there's a lot more conversations to be had, but looking forward to it.
Yeah, there's been a variety of ways in which kids and youth have been able to plug in. We've got some who make sack lunches very regularly and drop those off with like cute pictures drawn on the bags. We had, I think I mentioned it earlier, but this Christmas party that these 4th, 5th, and 6th graders did at Christmas time, really, I'm not a crier, and it did really kind of move me to tears, because they had the people living at the site and these kids really had some super honest conversations about what kids thought it might be like when they showed up. And some of those answers where I was scared, some of those answers where I thought people here would be dangerous. And the residents handled it so beautifully. And it was just this, it was really an amazing thing to watch, because these kids are going to be the leaders of our community at some point. And it was so good to see these people like really see each other, the humanity in each other, and then go play kickball together and ride bikes in the site. it was really incredible. And then, you know, the Y made the garden out and back. So there's a whole variety of ways that can be plugged in, from regular, you know, meal things or special parties or things like that. There's all kinds of options.
Great. It's nice to know that there's lots of, now you've got lots of precedent, right, for people to think about. So I'm going to just see, Lon, if you had any closing comments that you wanted to make.
Yeah, I guess I just want to reiterate thanks to everybody for taking time out of your day to come out and talk to us about this. One thing I did want to mention is that while there's been a lot of focus here on police calls in areas, it's also important to note that we've also seen a decrease in medical calls going to the areas, because we're working with people to make sure that we can achieve better health outcomes. And we didn't really get into like some of the personal success stories we've seen from some of our residents. But when you start to see the difference it actually makes in people's lives, you really understand why we're doing this type of work. Whether it's, you know, someone who needed to be able to get surgery and then have a place that they could come back for 6 weeks to be able to recover, to being able to address long-term medical issues that were presenting an obstacle to them, to being able to, using Tyler's words, get unstuck and re-engage with society. The ones that we have up and running have done really good work. And one question that came up that wasn't addressed during the chat was whether or not those of us that work in this arena would be willing to live next to one. You know, I work at City Hall. There is camping going on the lot immediately south of City Hall. All of the stuff that you folks have talked about, broken windows, needles outside of the doors, human feces in the downtown, we've experienced all of it. So we know exactly what it means to be working in that. But given the choice between being next to a safe stay and next to unsanctioned camping, safe stay every day, all day. They make that much of an impact in the neighborhood. And I've seen it, you know, I was skeptical of it because I'm kind of a professional skeptic. I'm paid to be a little bit of a professional skeptic, but they work. And the program design is solid and has really proved to be a benefit for the community. I would just say, please stay engaged as we continue to go through this journey before the city council makes the ultimate decision on whether or not this site is a no or a no-go. But again, nothing but gratitude for everybody taking time out of your day to come out and tell us your stories.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. And if you feel so inclined, we wanted to invite you to just put a little note in the chat of perhaps something you appreciated, something that you learned, or even something that you still have a question about. There will be another session in person at Discovery Middle School on next week on June 5th from 7 to 9 p.m. So you're welcome to come again. There'll be a lot of the same information, and we have, you know, it can be helpful to talk to people in person. And I know, you know, everyone who's here on the panel is willing to also have you talk to them personally as well. We will stay on for, as I said, about another 30 minutes. Just wanted to see if there's anybody who wanted to put anything in the chat before we close out the meeting itself. Got some thank yous. Again, we know there's a lot of places where you can spend your time. And so regardless of where you are in terms of if you have concerns, if you support this site being where it is, it's really appreciated. It really indicates that you care about your community and you want to be engaged. And I know that this team will take it very seriously, the concerns that you're raising. So thank you so much. We hope to see some of you back in next week. And again, I think all the folks on the team are really willing to talk to you directly about this as well. So we will go ahead and close out this meeting. And if you want to take us off recording, William, and then we'll just see if there's any other questions that folks have.